Hello and welcome to Monday night's Niall Fraser show, and we're carrying on a story that sort of erupted at the tail end of last week, and we're talking about reforms, inner turmoil, their internal turmoil, the Rupert Lowe fallout. We're going to look at everybody's statements. The war of statements has, it's shots fired. So we're going to get all that and more, and we've got a special guest tonight as well. David Clews will be joining us later on in the segment to talk all about it. So we can't start the show without our intro music, so get sharing the broadcast and let's do it. Let's rock this place. Hello and welcome to Monday night's Niall Fraser show, and we're carrying on a story that seems to be trundling along all the way through the weekend and into today. This Rupert Lowe situation has really riled a lot of people up. It's really annoyed a lot of people. It's made a lot of people lose faith in the reform message. So we'll sort of recap the story, the chronology of the situation, and there's my banner there. Reform internal turmoil, and that's what it is. So we get this story in the press mid last week, and it's put out there by Rupert Lowe, And he says, Nigel Farage is acting like the Messiah here. And lo and behold, the next day, accusations are lodged about Rupert Lowe. He's had the whip suspended for the party. And they start releasing stories of what happened. I mean, we have a complaint went into the police about an incident that happened way back in December. We've got, the statements back and forth. Rupert Lowe calling for the sacking of Zia Youssef, the chairman, and a lot of people are sticking with reform, saying that Rupert Lowe hasn't got the popularity that Farage has. Are you sticking just because of that? Are you sticking because they're the only ones that can really win elections, or are we sticking with them because or are we bailing and jumping ship to another party? Because it feels like, are they really serious on the deportations? And that's what a lot of people are asking here. Because Rupert was, what he's saying basically is that they had an argument with Zia Youssef about mass deportations and the need for them. And that is the root of their falling out, so to speak. So we're going to look at some statements. I've got some bookmarks. And we start with an interesting time as well. This is what's at stake here. So I'll bring this up. Here we go. This is why it's an interesting time, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll make it big so you can see. So it's an interesting time for reform, this happening, because reform is ahead. Well, they're not ahead in the polls, but they're absolutely smashing the polls, especially here in Scotland. And, smashing the polls right across the UK. But for them to be on equal par with Labour at this point in time, with this much time left in the game until May next year, the 2026 Scottish election, this is incredible numbers. And just look, up 18 points. Up 18 points because they've come from zero. They've come from 0 to 18%. And SNP are down 10%. Tories are down 11%. So it's one of these opportunities here. And Farage might very well be right. This opportunity to sort of change British politics forever is bigger than Rupert Lowe. But at what cost? That's what a lot of us are saying. Are we actually going to get what we want from reform? Are they the Tory Party 2.0? Because this rift in reform only serves Labour and the Tories at the end of the day. Up here it serves the SNP as well, I suppose. But, well, it's a bit different in Scotland as well, because reform are going to get a lot of their MSPs from proportional representation. We've got 2 votes up here in Scotland. You get the first vote for constituency, and you get your second vote for the list, the regional vote. And reform are going to get a heck of a lot of MSPs into Holyrood off the back of this regional list vote. So, in essence, it actually serves all the parties in Scotland if reform were to dwindle away into nothing. That's the truth. Because the Greens stand to lose, the Tories stand to lose, Labour stand to lose, SNP stand to lose. The Lib Dems stand to lose here in Scotland because reform are cutting into all their seats. Because they were previously not there. So it's changing the mix of Holyrood. For them to be at 18% is absolutely colossal. It's colossal. And it would almost guarantee them, I would say, 3 seats? If they got 18% across all the regions, they'd maybe end up with 3 seats in every region, making it 24? 24 MSPs. So, interesting times for reform to have such a crazy internal bust up. That's my thoughts on the matter. It's only serves everyone else. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and the argument that I'm seeing, sorry, I've got to be better called, but the argument that I'm seeing is that that there's no other like party really to vote for that can gain seats? It's got to be reform. People are chucking reform. You know, are people really going to jump? That's the question. Jay Fithershire, good evening. Thanks for the comments, guys. There were a few comments coming in the intro music. A lot of people loving the intro. It is a great intro, isn't it? But we're discussing reform. And my big question as well is, has Elon Musk partied with any money here? Remember, there was this rumour that he was going to give reform a huge amount of money. Has he partied with the cash yet? Remember, he says that Nigel Farage, remember the wee bust up on Twitter? Nigel Farage hasn't got what it takes, Musk says. Is this down to the mass deportations sentiment? Because a lot of people, and believe you me, I think a lot of people are viewing reform as the anti-immigration vote, which is a sort of extension, I suppose. I mean, reform was sort of born out of the Brexit party, wasn't it? So it's an extension of this anti-immigration sentiment. The Brexit vote was an anti-immigration vote. A lot of people don't like to see it that way, but that's what it was. People would rather take an economic hit than be swamped by endless dinghies. And that's what I think transpired in the Brexit vote. They gave us all the economic chat. They gave us this and that. But then ultimately, the anti-immigration vote won out. And we done a quote unquote, we done a Brexit. Well, following on from the Brexit party, we had the advent of reform, and I think their anti-immigration sentiment, their vote is it's a huge proportion of reform's vote come from the anti-immigration sentiment. Huge. It will be probably the number one concern for a reform voter if you were to ask them. What was your number one priority? Immigration, straight away. That's what I believe to be the case. So for them to be sort of not on the train, or perceived to be not on the train of mass deportations, then I'm sure they would lose a lot of votes. And we've seen that. We had the live stream on Friday night. And who did I have on? Well, I had on somebody who, who was having the night of his life. And that man was Kenny Smith, the chairman of the Homeland Party. And why was Kenny having the night of his life? Because people were saying, actually, the only thing that was keeping me in reform was Rupert Lowe. Because he had this sort of uncanny ability to connect with the British consciousness. And he managed it so, and it was every day. It wasn't a fluke. Rupert Lowe, his tweets, what he was saying really wasn't a fluke, and he was connecting on such a sort of visceral level with the public that the exile of Rupert Lowe, it's damaged a lot of people's faith in the Reform Party. That's what I think, and that's what I feel. First, it was we're chipping away at the optimism of reform, because a lot of people are disenchanted with politics in general. Up comes reform, people get a wee bit optimistic, maybe change is possible actually, and then they say, "Oh, we don't want Tommy Robinson in that lot," and then that was a sort of a watershed moment in the reform situation. But then they plod on. They just plod on anyway, and they still gain momentum. And then you think, well, maybe it wasn't, and even Tommy Robinson, having not been really ingratiated into the reform sort of bubble, is then told, he's telling people, I would still vote reform. And this is the thing, it's like, I said it myself, even if reform weren't to be picking me as a candidate, I would still probably encourage people to vote, because who else would you conceivably vote for? So the situation's quite quite strange here. You had the Tommy Robinson exile, and now we've got this new Rupert Lowe exile, and Rupert was on like some sort of upward trajectory. We've got some comments coming in here. This is YouTube. David said the link was DLive. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. And we'll play David's video. This is why I wanted to get him on, because he a very rational individual, knows a lot of the background stuff, and we can trust David to give his unadulterated opinion on the issue, having been, he's no bias at all. So I trust his judgment on this. So what we're going to do, we're going to play David Clews' video on this subject of Rupert Lowe, and then we'll just get him up and we'll ask his opinion straight up. So let's watch this.
It's David Clews here. We're all well. So, wow. Reform civil war has erupted. Now, look, before I get into more detail, I'm not a big fan of Farage. I'm not a big fan of Reform. I'm not a big fan of Rupert Lowe either. I don't really think they will represent the true interests of the people. But I'm just going to look at this from like a non-partisan point of view and just give you my take if I was a normie. There's only one winner in this, and that's Nigel Farage. Everyone knows who Nigel Farage is. I mean, as much as, again, I don't like Isabel Oakeshott, she was right about what she said. Rupert Lowe is big on Twitter. That's not got cut through amongst the wider public. The vast majority of the public aren't overly engaged in social media. Thing is, Farage did this with UKIP. Farage did this with the Brexit Party. He doesn't like anyone criticising him. I mean, what they've done to Rupert Lowe is pretty dodgy. They've been sitting on this for ages now. They've come out today. But I will say one thing, it is very ruthless. Farage has shown that his crown will not be taken. So, is that not what you want from a leader? The ruthlessness that Farage shows? Or is it all about him? Look, either way, who stands to benefit from this? The Uniparty, Labour, Tory. I mean, there's an argument the Reform are part of the Uniparty as well. They've been very weak on the Ukraine stuff, but I just think my full conclusion is the only winner here is going to be Nigel Farage, because of his name, because of his recognition and who he is. And as I said, doesn't mean I like Farage. I just think Rupert Lowe will sink into obscurity. Again, he might grow on social media, but it's Farage or nothing if people do think Reform's a vehicle for change. Anyway, that's my tuppence worth. Speak to you later. Bye.
Well, you can't really fault what David Clews is saying there, and he had the exact same reaction as what I did. He says there's only one person this benefits here, and that is the Uniparty. And even, to postulate that Reform are sort of in on this sort of Uniparty. And, has the Uniparty grown another head? Has the Hydra grown another head? Is this what we're looking at here? So, and what I mentioned there is what they've done to Rupert Lowe might be beyond the pale. And we see things like this. Rupert Lowe have been informed by a reliable source that senior Reform figures has been briefing journalists that I have dementia. In politics, there's rough and tumble. I get that, but it's sick. What they're doing to me is disgusting. So we're seeing this unravel right before our very eyes. This situation with Reform. A lot of people. As soon as we get David Clews joining, we get the David Clews bump. We got all the comments in. Absolutely fantastic stuff. If the party splits because of low suspension, yes. This is the thing. It's very possible that it splits. Will it split along Rupert Lowe lines? I was thinking to myself, what could they possibly do to piss people off more? They tell Tommy Robinson where to go. They tell Rupert Lowe where to go. And I was thinking, what could they do to piss people off? They could say, Boris Johnson has joined Reform. That's what I thought was coming next. Bad news happens in threes. But we've got the man himself, David Clews. We're going to get him up and we're going to ask him for his take on the situation. Again, like the comments were saying, very unflinching in his views. Sticks his neck out on the line a lot of the time. I remember the story of Kate Middleton. Remember there was the stories about Kate Middleton. I'm laughing away because it was so silly at the time. It was like, oh, where is Kate Middleton? Nobody's seen her. Nobody's seen Kate Middleton. And then there was these images that were put and people ran them through AI, and it was proof that they were doctored images. And then, we get this weird statement for Buckingham Palace. So, well, actually, Kate Middleton, she's an amateur editor. She's sitting there on Photoshop editing her own pictures and that. And I was just like, come on. It's just so hilarious that we're fed this nonsense. But we're going to get him up. I'll bring this down for the time being, get me up. But here's the man himself, David Clews. Welcome to the show, David.
Neil, how are you? Are you well?
I've got a tiny bit of a sniffle, but other than that, I'm perfect. What about yourself? You doing well?
Very well, thanks. How's the family doing? Are they all right?
They're all perfect. Thank you for asking. We Sydney's just about to turn. Well, he's turning 1 soon. It's been it's been a roller coaster of a year for me, to be honest. Becoming a dad. But there's nothing like it.
Is he a ginger as well, Neil? Is he a ginger?
He's more ginger than I am, David.
Wow.
Which is you can imagine. I get accused of using Iron Brew's shampoo over here. So people say he's my wee spitting image.
Oh, that's nice.
It's just brilliant. I love it.
That's nice. Hopefully there isn't the stigma nowadays, Neil.
Well, I'm on the opposite view, David. I hope that the stigma still is there. So, bullying creates character. Yeah,
no, because you take so much abuse and you're like, look, listen, I was brought up a ginger. Like, this is water off a duck's back.
I was a ginger stepchild. I don't think that you could create someone more brought through the fire. But what I brought you up, and we'll get your socials up. If you don't know who David Clews is, you can catch him on his stream on D Live at Unity News. So tell us a tiny bit yourself. I think most of the majority of the viewers, I suppose, will know exactly who you are. But a brief breakdown of who you are.
Well, I've been involved in politics a long time, been about the block, and I've been doing UNN now for 7 years in April. And as I said, it's been an interesting 7 years, to put it simply, Neil. And here we are now in 2025, and it's the Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage battle royale that's taking place, isn't it?
It's insane. Honestly, it is a battle royale, and it's I even forgot to mention Ben Habib in this situation where Reform, they keep chipping away at people's faith and people's optimism in the party. First it's Tommy Robinson, then I think it was Ben Habib. He just got straight up replaced by this Sia Youssef, as far as I'm concerned. And then we get this Rupert Lowe situation, and then all of them sort of backing it as well. Do you think they're going to plod on with this, David? Do you think they're going to take
again, people don't like to hear this, but in my experience, this will have zero impact on Reform. This is it's a social media spat, and whether people like to admit it or not, the vast majority of people just aren't engaged in politics. If you walked along a high street in anywhere in Britain and you had a picture of Nigel Farage in one hand and a picture of Rupert Lowe in one hand, I'd say the vast majority of people would recognise Nigel Farage and be able to name Nigel Farage. Mm-hmm. I'd say hardly anyone would be able to recognise, let alone name, Rupert Lowe. And look, clearly my politics, clearly many of us have politics that are much more robust. And I was talking about this a lot last night. And my assessment of it is actually quite simple. The British establishment will not allow anyone any further to the right of Nigel Farage. Yeah. What they're basically saying is, look, he's your guy. If you want change, then that's all you're getting.
Yeah.
And the reason that exists is because the whole sphere of politics has moved so far to the left over the last 3 decades, where mainstream politics is basically like Socialist Workers' Party and basically like quasi-communistic. Nigel Farage is a centre-right, Thatcherite conservative. That's all he is. And he's liberal on most things. Maybe some things give him a bit of unease, like, abortion being 25 weeks when he thinks it should be 20 weeks. Or, there's everyone knows there's too many immigrants, but blah, blah, blah. Like, Farage isn't that right wing at all. But because the wider conversation has moved so far to that direction, I mean, when they talk about Nigel Farage representing the far right, they are actually correct. He represents the far right of the political system that is permitted in the United Kingdom. And everyone else is looking at it like, well, this guy's not even that right wing. He's not that. And look at what they did over the whole Ukraine thing, where they're like, reform are Putin's puppets. And like, they all came out and parroted exactly the same lines, yet offered a tiny wee bit of critique. And for the British establishment, that makes you a Putin puppet.
It was very
ridiculous.
meek. It was very meek, the response to the whole JD Vance Oval Office rumble, wasn't it? I mean, that was a proper Royal Rumble, and to see that, like, you know, sort of trotted out right in the mainstream media was fantastic to see. I mean, generally this stuff happens behind closed doors, but
yeah, it was
again, the response was very meek indeed, and like you're saying, you know, it's the weakest of criticisms as well. To Zelensky.
Yeah, I said at the time that realistically, Farage should have come out and said, you know what, President Trump's right on this, JD Vance is right on this. But I think even see, again, one of the problems is the polling will indicate, again, the vast majority of the British public get their news from the BBC, they get the news from Sky and ITV. They believe the propaganda about the Ukraine conflict. I'd probably say about 70, 80%. So from a purely political perspective,
it's maybe the right play.
It probably is the right play. And it's like the whole thing about the whole Farage spat is, and people say, well, Farage did this to Kilroy Silk. He did this to Godfrey Bloom. He's done this now to Rupert Lowe. Well, the only one left standing is Farage, because again, Farage, I don't know why, Neil, people had these preconceptions about reform and Nigel Farage. I was pointing out, like, Zia Yusuf worked for Goldman Sachs.
Exactly.
You know, there are all the reform backers, Nick Candy, who is a London property guy, Richard Tice, another London property guy. These guys have built businesses on mass immigration, on foreign capital. They're not radical at all. Just because the media calls them radical, it doesn't mean they're radical at all. And then people then get caught up. People dance to the tune that the media plays for them, and that's the biggest problem that you face.
I mean, when it comes to, reform, do you think they are just has the uniparty hydra just grown an extra head? I mean, I sort of agree with your assessment that, you know, when you get to reform, it is, you can go no further than this point. You're not going any further than reform.
I actually think they're just basically it is a bait and switch. They're just replacing the Tory party because they know the brand is toxic, and it is just a changing of the guard. And even again, I pointed this out with the election of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is basically an 80s Democrat. Exactly. It's just that America has gone so far to the left. An 80s Democrat now seems right wing. And it's just the same here. And I think they clearly recognize that probably 10 to 15 million of the British electorate is really pissed off and they're really angry and they don't have a home. And their worry is that these people would maybe join, say, like George Galloway's Workers' Party, or they would join someone like Homeland, or like if the BNP still existed. Well, what I'm trying to get across to people is, I mean, look, I don't believe political change is possible, but if you believe that your vote counts and you want to make a change, the only show in town is the Reform Party. And it's like with Trump as well. Clearly, Trump is better than Biden. Clearly, he will do some decent stuff, but it's still nowhere near what needs to be done to deal with the systemic problem that exists in both Britain and America and Europe. They simply are, they are a different kind of manager. And that's all I just try and get across is think of countries as big companies. There'll be different factions within the companies, but they all represent the same company at the end of the day. And that's what you're being offered. None of it's really that radical.
Well, I sort of see, I mean, you can sort of tell by the tea leaves that they're becoming the sort of Tory Party 2.0 with just the defections that are happening. And it's not too far out of the realms of possibility that, you know, that Boris Johnson could, you know, come off the bench and join Reform. I could see that happening tomorrow and nobody would bat an eye. And like you said, you know, they'd probably just plod onward anyway. He's got some name recognition that people know who Boris is. So I can see that it does feel that we're in a sort of sorry situation. But
it's because look, everyone that's kind of awake, they see the demographics of this country. They see the reality of the situation. Unfortunately, you've got this. The demographic that votes the most is, whether people like it or not, is 60 plus, and that's who they're appealing to. I just feel that the people who are more radical, who do believe in real change, we're gonna just have to sit and wait it out. But the problem is we don't really have the time to sit and wait it out.
Exactly, because every year that goes past, the demographics change. It gets harder and harder to sort of break this sort of the stalemate. You know, our votes are getting cancelled out, you know, after every year. We've got a diminishing population, and immigrants are just coming in.
It's what it is, Neil, it's just the surge of it. And the fact is, people in 2016 voted to leave the EU to control their borders. And what did they actually do? They brought, the migration was unparalleled, net 1.2 million in 1 year. They flooded the entire country with immigrants. And again, the birth rate amongst immigrants is significantly higher. And but the problem is, most people don't view things from the overall national prism. They just see it like what's happening in their street or what's happening in their town. And again, people live very atomized existences. They lead very narcissistic existences. It's like, well, what's good for me? And it's a tough one to try and break down. And see, the thing is as well, Neil, this is the thing I've come to the conclusion about politics is it's just full of grifters on all sides who have done very well. Like, you take the SNP, say I was a Scottish nationalist in the 1970s and 80s. You've had 40 years of SNP people sucking on the teat of Westminster funding. They've made fortunes out of it.
Yeah.
And like, Scotland's nowhere near independence. So you'd be let down. Take the Irish Republicans. Again, you know, I'm not an Irish Republican, but people died. People died for what they thought was achieving a united Ireland. And here we are in 2025, and Northern Ireland's still British, and all these Sinn Féiners have made a lot of money. So the British state does have an amazing way of keeping going. You know, because people said, well, but now Northern Ireland would be a united Ireland. It's not. Scotland would be independent. It isn't. And as I said, it is there is this just slow grind, as I said, this managerial class that runs this country very, very well and stops people from getting angry. Although we did see last summer, when the anger boiled over, that there is real discontent lurking underneath, and it doesn't take much to bring it out. And clearly, again, you've got all these separate communities. They've got their different conflicts. It is a tinderbox that could erupt at any time.
Well, I mean, there's the constant news flashes. When somebody at the we had the Homeland boys on Friday night, and some of the people that they're having at their talk, their remigration conference, I think, is, you know, the guy who coined the Great Replacement theory. you know, I keep thinking back that we've, like you say, we've got this managerial class, and what do we see today? I mean, who's just been appointed the new Prime Minister of Canada?
Mark
I mean,
Carney.
you can't write this, David. I mean, how long? You've seen this pan out, like literally over the course of your entire life, but since probably in great detail over the 7 years you've been doing UNN. But this is just, it's par for the course, isn't it? You know, who else would become Prime Minister of Canada but Max Carney? You know, Governor of the Bank of England, a central banker.
It's incredible. A total globalist, never been in politics in his life. He just rocks up and he's now the Prime Minister of Canada. And again, nobody even questions that. They just see this guy who looks kind of slick in a suit and says, I'm going to fight. It was the same as Sunak as well. But I've been talking a lot about this recently. The major problem that you have is for people who are in positions of power and influence, life is actually okay.
Yeah.
If you're in that older generation and you've done well, say you've bought your house, say you're sitting on a big asset, you've got a pension, life really isn't that bad. And there is no pain out there for most people. And then the younger generation, who are most of them are very left wing, or that squeezed middle, they're just so busy trying to pay their mortgage. They're so busy just trying to put food on the table. And again, they're also terrified. They're terrified of saying anything. They know people know the repercussions in this country of speaking out. They know that you can go to jail for a social media post. They know that you can lose your job for saying a man isn't a woman. So it clearly works. And again, the analogy I use is it's like a hostage situation.
Yeah.
How can like 2 or 3 people hold 200 people hostage? Well, they have the guns and they only need to like shoot a hostage to show who's in charge. And most people will just acquiesce to that power structure.
Oh, David. I mean, it's filling maybe optimism like that, but it's I mean, I was sort of filled with a tiny bit of optimism when I seen that Homeland was coming up in the numbers. You mentioned George Galloway's Workers' Party, and you know, as much as I disagree with George on a lot of things, he's absolutely correct when it comes to the Ukraine war. And this is the sort of thing with George that we'll go back and we'll have like massive arguments, but then he's absolutely stellar on some issues that, you know, and how can we be so different in opinion when we got that right? I don't see.
Well, look, here's the thing about, say, Workers' Party, Homeland. What I would say is, out of the political flavors you're being offered, they are the closest to genuine as you will find. But you only need to look at the situation in Romania, where they've just banned Carlin Georgescu from standing as president.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is my other argument. If you were a real based right winger and you were about to take power, or, I mean, look, again, people don't like talking about this because they see him as a lefty. Jeremy Corbyn was a threat to the system. Jeremy Corbyn was anti-Zionist. He was anti-NATO. He would be considered pro-Russia. The establishment went out of their way to stop Jeremy Corbyn from becoming prime minister. So it doesn't matter if you're on the left or you're on the right. If you are a radical, you won't be allowed to take power.
And this is why we've just got Farage. I mean,
that's
what
you're left with. Yeah. So there you go. So this is all I'm trying to say to people is, why is anyone getting the... Don't get your hopes up.
Yeah.
You can have Nigel or you can have Keir Starmer. At least under Nigel, you might not go to jail for posting on Facebook. You know?
It's you know, people... I was listening to Steve Bannon a few times when these are such extreme problems that our country's facing. Extreme problems. The dinghies don't stop. We've got this delusional trans ideology permeating our culture. We've got all these weird things. You can go to jail for a social media post. All these extreme situations, and we need extreme measures. And the only way to sort of to counteract these things is by extremely severe measures. I mean, we need like a total moratorium on all immigration, I would say. Like, just stop. Like, no more people in, and no more people in until we fix the problem that we've got here. But we're never going to hear that from establishment politicians. And I think the sort of crux of this issue with Rupert Lowe and Zia Youssef, if you mention Nigel Farage and you think they're not going to get any more bumps in the road, then it would probably infer as well that Zia Youssef's very comfortable in his position, I can imagine. So I don't think Zia Youssef is going to make any leeway either. He'll be there for the duration. So
no, I mean, Zia Youssef is just the British Vivek Ramaswamy. That's what it is. It's just it's like the same. It's like, have you ever seen Shaun of the Dead?
Of course,
you know that scene where they're out walking and then they come across the
same couple.
That's what it is. Like, British politics is just mirroring like the American one. So Zia Youssef is the British Vivek Ramaswamy, and like as I said, the UK economy is worth trillions. It makes a lot of people a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to manage it very well. The security services are going to manage it very, very well. So my sort of message to people is, if you are voting, if you believe that you can make a change at the ballot box, then Nigel's your man. And you're going to have to just suck it up and be disappointed. And that's going to take you up. I mean, that's taking you up to 2029.
Yes. So, and then from there, it would be the exact same again. We'll get less. We get a tiny bit. Well, not a tiny bit. We get disappointed just saying 2029 when this next general election comes round, right? I suppose it's maybe a bit different in Scotland, actually. If you want to take it in a sort of Scottish...
I think reform doing well in Scotland is actually a pretty good thing, because it will totally upend the system in Scotland, and it will cause them to have a meltdown. Again, if you really want to send a message to the SNP, Labour and the Tories in Scotland, vote reform, because they'll have a meltdown over it. But what is causing your political opponents to have a meltdown actually achieving what needs to be achieved?
Exactly.
So you're dealing with like hysterical people, and just like, it's like, remember there was the whole triggering the libs thing, and everyone used to laugh about it. Now it's like, right, okay, we've triggered the libs. It's now 2025. Where are we going with this? And it is a bit like they're just running down the clock and letting the time go. So the only things that I can see that would really make a big change is there's either an economic collapse, which I actually think is possible in the 2030s. I think if you look at history, you had the Great Depression of 2029. That's 100 years ago. And then, there's going to be an economic downturn eventually. Well, that may lead to something. And again, if you look at the amount of debt, then all this stuff, Neil, the debt that there is in the world, central banking, all that's going to implode eventually. Also, the demographics.
It's inevitable. Yeah.
It is. It's just, it's all going to collapse. But Ernest Hemingway said, how do you go bankrupt? Slowly, then all at once. But it's just, what do you do until then? Like, everyone is just trying to find stuff to do, when sometimes you have to let the thing play out.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's the same all the way along with sort of revolutionary lines, where it's always after an economic collapse that you get actual change, and that's about the only thing that will get people out of their houses and rebelling, is when you hit them in the wallet. So it's a strange situation.
What they did as well, Neil, and people forget about how revolutionary it was in 2008, where they just started printing money. No one had ever thought they could do that, but they did. And you know what? It refloated the system. And then during COVID, they just printed billions, 400 billion in Britain. In America, they printed trillions, and it kept the party going. But the thing is, there's only so many times you can keep doing that.
Yes,
and
before people cotton on.
What you've got is, again, and I've been doing a lot of analysis of this, you've got the kind of post-war generation who have been brought up with like the guilt of what happened during, because that is, in a simplistic argument, you're not allowed to have borders because you'll end up like the you-know-who's,
Yes.
or, and eventually, and these people have been propagandized with war movies, with guilt stuff. Eventually that's going to stop, because that'll end up being 100 years ago. A bit like Napoleon, he was the big demon, and the Antichrist. So then you're going to get to a position where people are in Europe and they're looking at the situation. They're saying, look, there's no Europeans here. What's going on? And you'll have a generation that is slightly younger and other people who may achieve something. Or the big risk is you just end up like a South Africa situation where people just retreat to gated communities, and there is no real conclusion to it. And
yes, a suspended animation almost.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that happening. People retreating to certain sectors of the UK. I can see that happening. I mean, it
already has. It already has. Look at people have moved out of London. The amount of, you go up to the Highlands of Scotland, it's all English people. You go to the south of Edinburgh, it's all English people. And the reason why, although they may not admit it, these people have left England. They've left the cities because of what these cities are like now. They would never admit that. Do you know something? They might consciously not even know it, but that was their subconscious reaction. And it'll happen more and more and more and more. But as I say, you've got these dull managerial, like Starmer. Starmer for me is the embodiment of the British establishment. Dull, nasal, managerial, talentless. He can barely read without a script.
Yep.
And that's what they're basically saying is now, look, here you go. This is your leader. And he's just happy to stand there and be hated. Swinney as well. Like, look at Swinney. Swinney is just this. He's
a perfect example of this managerial class you're talking about, isn't it? He's like the poster boy for this managerial class. He's been in government for over 2 decades in the Scottish nationalist movement, and they've done nothing. They've not went anywhere.
Full of them. Like the Tories are full of them. Guys, I was thinking about a guy like Murdo Fraser. Like, I remember Murdo Fraser when I was in the Tories. He's still hanging about. 28 years he's been in that parliament. 28 years. I mean, it's ridiculous, the failure that these people have gotten away with. And it is a very cozy club. And that's why, see, when they talk about like democracy and everything, what they basically mean is their wee club. And they just want to keep their wee club going because they're well-paid public sector employees. And that's the other problem, Neil, is when people get into power, it is very intoxicating. Like, see even Niall Fraser was this radical, right? Neil was this radical who goes to Westminster. They'll take you down to Westminster and say, Mr. Fraser, here's your office. Look at that beautiful vista view of the Thames. We've got a reception tonight with the ambassador of Bahrain, and this is Svetlana, who's your Ukrainian refugee, is going to look after you. And we're back paying your salary, and here's your 100,000 a year, and here's your train ticket. It's so easy to buy people off.
I know. I was looking at that. I mean, there's a Labour MP up here, Pamela Nash. I'll see if I can get the picture of Pamela Nash.
I know exactly who she is. I used to work with her. I know exactly who she is.
So Pamela Nash, Labour MP up. I think maybe she wrote for this outlet. I can't remember what, Scotland and Union or something like that.
Yeah. Worked for them. If I'm being full disclosure, so that was about 2017, so quite a while ago.
So I was sent 2 different pictures, but this is Pamela Nash now. We'll bring this up. We'll add this to the stage. So Pamela Nash, when I knew her, was half that size. If I'm just sort of laying credence to what you're saying here. As I said, people are actually
I ended my split with Scotland and Union in quite an acrimonious way, and I mean, I could be very nasty, but I think like there is potentially a problem there with food, but it's
But it's not just the only one who goes down to Westminster and ends up giant though. But this is what I'm saying. It's literally, you're becoming fat off taxpayer money, and the lifestyles indulge. It's all indulgence down there. I can imagine you're absolutely right. It's hard to escape the golden handcuffs that are attached.
I heard a story as well about David Mundell, the MP.
Yes.
David Mundell. He lost his phone apparently, and it was found, and it was just like full of rent boys' phone numbers and stuff like that. Because David Mundell was married, had kids, came out as a homosexual, and again, people don't realize, like as I said, you're in London, you're there during the week, just the degeneracy.
It's nuts, I know.
Yeah, and the problem is with that's right, subsidised free food as well. It is. But the thing about these Scottish nationalists is so annoying is that the SNP are part of that system. They're not trying to break the system apart now either. And it's just a sad situation all round. There's no one genuine. There's none of them.
Do you think? I mean, a lot of people. I always look at the likes of what's her name, Mary Black. Yeah, and you know Mary Black well as well. So she was one of the, if not the youngest MP ever sent in to Westminster, I believe, and that might have been just before the last general election there. But she's very young. She was normal looking when she went down. Wasn't she, David? She was very normal, average looking lassie. She looked like she's just an everyday woman. And then when she went down, and then years later, she comes back, and it's like she's went through this rainbow indoctrination. She's ends up with the short hair, and she looks like she's got a lot of drug addiction issues and drink addiction. She's become an alcoholic or something like that. So there's something strange about the process down there. And what she said in one of our interviews was like there was like 5 pubs in Westminster. So
they are all basically like alcoholics as well. I mean, politics is just full of some of the most, honestly, just horrific people on the planet. And look, with like with Rupert Lowe, they've basically stabbed this guy in the front and back and neck,
and they've thrown his body out for everyone to see, and yet nothing's going to happen. I think that's. I think you're right in your analysis that this won't harm reform. This won't harm Farage. This is not going to be it's not even going to be registered as a den. No. This is just, they're just going to go on business as usual. And we might get some more stuff in the coming weeks, but then it'll fizzle out and then it'll be back to business.
Yeah. And as I said, if you look at people who are, and I know, like Neil, I know you're a good guy, you're a genuine guy, and you put your head above the parapet. And like Rose Docherty as well, the lady, the abortion clinic, she's another good lady. There are good people out there, but anyone who dares start questioning that cozy little consensus is targeted for elimination. And they're very good at doing it. They are very good. They are experts at it. They will find your weakness. Like, to some people, it's food. To some people, it's, let's be realistic, it's younger boys and girls. To some people, it's alcohol. To some people, it is just it's ego. Like they'll get you on like Trevor Phillips in the morning. They will find your weak point and
exploit it to its maximum.
And
the rest is history.
I've always said that, like, I would be probably the easiest man in the world to corrupt. They would know exactly what to do with me, and I would fall for it. I'm only joking. I wouldn't actually. I mean, that's why it's just it's not the politicians that is the problem. It is the politics itself, and it's the system, and it's the other big problem. And people don't like talking about it. They're scared to talk about it. But the reality is there's too many women now in politics as well. And it feminizes it. And it, like, men tend to be able to have arguments, fight with each other, but then kind of forget about it and move
Mhm.
on. The culture it's ultra feminized as well now, and it is not
Well,
like they say you need a
it's by design as well,
It
isn't
is.
it? I mean, this
It
feminism
is.
stuff, because I mean they've got the quotas and everything that all these parties have to meet, and all these sort of DEI requirements, and women have been a sort of massive portion of that for the last
It is.
before they even added any other sort of minority
and
to it.
all the foreigners as well. And
Mhm.
clearly, it's a total mess. But as we kind of discussed, Neil, this can't continue. The system will collapse eventually. I just can't tell you when. It might be tomorrow. It might not be for 10 or 15 years, but it won't go any longer than that.
An economic collapse, it's inevitable, David, isn't it? It's going to happen, whether it's just like you said in the 2030s or within the next 2030. It's going to happen.
Yep.
I mean, the Bank of England and all the central banks. I mean, it's the situation as well. Like, I come up with this housing policy because I'm actually trying to change things up here. You know what I'm like. I'm a stupid ideologue, but I wanted people to be able to build their own homes and circumvent the lenders, David. I wanted us as a sort of Scottish government or sort of to run an experiment where we stockpiled materials and people could just take from it and build their own house to circumvent the bankers and the lenders, because the money that you're being lent just lends to the eventual collapse, because that's just you go in for the mortgage. I used to think in my naivety that you walked into the bank, and it was to a certain time, but you walked into the bank and you said, I need a £200,000 mortgage, and they said, okay, there you go, sign this, and then they went into the vault and they picked up the money and they gave it to you. Whereas now,
fractional reserve lending, people don't understand fractional reserve lending. For every pound they get, they're lending out 20. Is that right? What's the actual number?
I think it's something like that. But it's again, it's like it all led to the financial collapse. This fractional reserve banking, where all these banks were over leveraging on their mortgages. I mean, although they are creating the money out of thin air and lending it to you with interest, they still have it on their books and they still have to account for it. But then it all just come crumbling down. And nothing really happened in 2008. It was just like, well, we'll continue. We'll have some. We'll throw Alam to the slaughter, and then we'll just continue this money printing. And to this day, it's just becoming more and more rampant, especially during the COVID years. Is going to steal your word there. But during the COVID years, what did you say? 450 billion was just,
they printed, and they borrowed and spent about another 750 billion. They spaffed up a wall. As I say, they're just there has, and the other thing I pointed out is, if you even look at Britain, you had the revolving door. You had Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer. You had 5 prime ministers in like 7 or 8 years.
It's actually crazy when you think about it, because going back to when I was growing up, at least you had a semblance of stability, and now
even here as well, you had Sturgeon, then you had Yusuf. Was he less than a year, Hamza Yusuf?
Hamza was it might have been just over a year, I think.
Just over a year. And then you've got Swinney as well. So as I said, I think they've panicked. That's why they've got Swinney in. That's why they've got Starmer in, just the dull managerial, but it won't go. Neil, I'm gonna have to head off now, all right?
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, David. You've been enlightening as always. I've got some of your banners there. If you don't know, David, you can catch a stream on DLive TV /Unity News, and I brought your Rumble up as well. You seem to be doing well on Rumble, I've seen, which is quite a hard task in itself, but I mean, you're doing really well over there on Rumble. So if you want to give them a
good
follow
looks, talent, and intelligence, Neil,
that's all it takes. I mean, that's why I'm losing the battle here.
Not really. It's just interesting though that I mean, sometimes I think about it as well. I was having a bit of an introspective navel gaze last night, and even I kind of feel like, am I part of the system? Like, because I'm on these things,
I
you do start to feel, what am I contributing? Even if you think about it,
I see what you're saying.
social media is even just so toxic now.
Mhm.
Like, because you're all there and you're all trying to get likes. And you're all trying to. It's a self-perpetuating.
It's like
cycle.
it's a like you say, it's self-perpetuating, but it's like a mental health epidemic that's happening in real time, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
this sort of seeking to be the most controversial, or to have the hottest take, or to have this sort of acceleration towards absolute mental health doom. And again, it's not actually achieving anything, David.
No,
I mean, it's
I know.
it's achieving fuck all.
That's the thing, as I said, that really upsets me the most. Is I felt during COVID, like, people were organised. There was rallies. They were outside the BBC. They were outside STV. That's all kind of gone. That energy fizzled out, and that's where it's just this feeling of we've kind of gone backwards, and it is very disappointing. But we just have to keep going. Family's very, very important, and community is also very important. And there are a lot of good people out there. It's very frustrating because we're banging our head against a brick wall. But Neil, thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. You do have good work. You're one of the good guys as well out there. So keep doing what you do. Okay, Neil.
Thanks. Will do, David. Thanks again for coming on. So that was David Clews. I mean, we thank him for his. I don't particularly feel any better in myself for having talked to him, but it's one of these things where he just gives you his opinion so forthright. He doesn't hold back in his opinion. It is a bit black-pilled, but at the same time, he's right in what he's saying. I don't think voters are going to be given this opportunity to go further than reform. And I think if you're right-wing, then I think reform is probably, you're going to be landing on that at some point or some stage. Great stuff, Clews. Cheers, Niall, for having on. No, it's an absolute pleasure to have David on. He's a fantastic guy, and I like his show very much. So he's filled me with so many ideas that I don't know where to actually go there. I don't know how to digest it anymore, And, I like what he said about the internet there, because everyone's had this sort of epiphany at one point, especially if you're big in the Twitter sphere, or when you're tweeting a lot and you're getting millions and millions of impressions. But then where's it all going? You see your time and effort being flooded into this black mirror. And it just, no change actually happens. So it needs to be, I think, for a lot of things to happen, it's weird that I think we need to take a step back for technology, and a step back for the phones, and a step back for the social media in order to actually achieve any sort of change. That's what I feel. But that sort of starts in the schools, I think, because if we ourselves can see the detrimental effects that this social media spiral is having on people, then surely we must take it out of the schools and prevent them from going through the exact same thing. When adults can't handle social media, the children certainly can. And we Fat Shug said it the best. Said it 1,000 times. We need to go back to go forward. Absolutely agree with you, Fat Shug. We Fat Shug, sorry. What's Tony saying? I like the other guests, the ones that come on to sort David out. That would be quite funny. Anyway, I mean, it was just a short one tonight. Probably, we're only going to really go an hour. We weren't going to do any more in-depth stuff when it comes to the reform divide. I think David Clews sort of summed it up for me there. I do believe there will be at least a small element of like backlash towards reform, towards the way that they've treated Rupert Lowe. But at the same time, is it going to affect him really when it comes to the next election? I just don't see it. David is a wise lad, so he is. It will definitely have, and he's right to point out the differences here in Scotland as well, because if and when, I think it's more of a when, reform candidates get into Holyrood, they will just cause pandemonium. I think all the other parties will be hysterical, like you said. And we'll get some entertaining politics here in Scotland, but it won't will it result in any tangible change that people can actually measure on the streets? I don't see it. Do you have your own YouTube channel? Yes, you can subscribe to me. It's all on the bottom. Just type in Niall Fraser Show and it'll pop right up. Or maybe you're not even asking me that question, Joey. But thanks for joining us. And thanks once again to David Clews for jumping on at such short notice. I think the story will develop as the week goes on. If we sort of see anything, we'll be highlighting it. But at the same time, I can see it fizzling out rather quickly. A lot of people, again, does it feel like this is dented reform? You know, if you ask someone in the street, they might not even have heard about it. Neither party funded by the people, not the corporations. I mean, that's the actual truth. We've got too many people just buying their way into politics. But I wonder, it takes me back to the thing where has Elon Musk actually partied with any cash when it comes to reform at this stage? Will that change his mind? Will this spat change his mind? I suppose time will only tell. But thank you very much for joining us on this Niall Fraser Show. Just a short one tonight. I'm very busy tomorrow morning, so I can't afford to stay up too much longer. So thanks once again for joining us. If you are on YouTube, which quite a lot of you are, do give me a wee subscription. We'll be going for more guests. I think the sort of recent success of the Homeland Party guys coming on, we had a great discussion with Kenny Smith, the chairman of the Homeland Party, who's jetting off to Berlin. You know, I think Homeland are definitely coming up. They seem to be a sort of lifeboat for people who are, you know, they're sick and tired of reform. I think when it comes to mass deportations, if like me, you feel that it's a necessity, it's an absolute necessity that we have mass deportations here in the country, then I think that you're sort of slowly but surely losing your faith in reform, that any of that's going to happen. Thanks for all the subs, guys. Really appreciate it. Really do. We're growing the YouTube channel ever so slowly, but I have a lot of time for Alex Cave. Yes, indeedy. So a lot of the thing with the Homeland boys, we fat sugar, it feels like they're a lot more accessible. Don't you find that a lot of them are way more willing to engage with you than sort of the establishment types. Night, Ashley. If you haven't watched the show before, stay by for the outro music because you'll love it. But other than that, guys, it's been a spirited hour. Thanks to everyone who's for tuning in. Over almost 500 people live. Absolutely fantastic. YouTube numbers absolutely killing it tonight. So once and for all, have a great week ahead of you. That's Monday done. Onward towards Tuesday. Good night, everyone.